Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Warm greetings and peace to you all. Our sincere apologies. We wanted to start precisely at 9, but as you might possibly expect, due to COVID protocol and traffic jam in Addis here and there, people are not still, they're still coming. I can see here a lot of them, but some are still on their way. So if you could be patient enough as always to have all of them just in about maximum 10 to 15 minutes. Once again, our apologies, particularly those who are waiting for us online. It's because of, as I said, for those reasons, and we're expecting them to come here, and then we shall start immediately within 10 to 15 minutes. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you again. Right, we are back. Excellencies, dignitaries, honorables, and all protocols observed. Warmest greetings from Institute for Peace and Security Studies for Addis Ababa University, Ethiopia, and EIP, European Institute of Peace. Distinguished guests, both online and on-site here, we'd like to thank you very much indeed for making the time to be together today, discussing one specifically and very significantly a pressing issue, hate speech, misinformation, and of course, let me add, fake news. These are real concern, I would say global concern, particularly sometimes regarded as threat for security, human security as well as state security and entire survival. And you might ask some quick question, why should IPSS be interested in this issue? Our answer is very simple. IPSS, Institute for Peace and Security Studies, stands for sustainable peace, for global peace, global security. And it has 4 pillars. One is peace education, another is peace research, and followed by community engagement, and finally policy dialogue. These could be disturbed if there is hatred, hate speech disseminated unreasonably, misinformation, misinterpretation, which immediately scatters bad news, instability, and at the same time, of course, leading to fragmentation of a nation, to be honest. So that being the case, whereas EIP are extremely interested in this timely issue and are very much delighted to make some presentations, and at the same time, of course, then engage your very active engagement wherever you are, your very active involvement in the very topical issue today. And there are some caveats as I speak here, because it is participant-centered. It is you who are the owners of it. So thanks to technology, which also made us, communicate wherever you are, either here with us or outside here, but it also gives us some conditions to be efficient and at the same time effective in our communication. Whenever you have some questions to ask, comments to make, you have to mute your microphone, particularly those people who are here on site are requested to mute immediately your microphone. Then we will have a floating, revolving around microphone that our angelic boys and girls will be providing you with in a moment whenever you need them. So that is one of the caveats. Another one is, this is public-centered, this is people-centered. So in here, we really expect your engagement. Thirdly, and the third caveat is, we're going to distribute an action point, an action paper to be signed by all of you to make commitment to fight hate speech, fake news, and misinformation, to make your contribution. So we're going to circulate it both online and on-site so as to build better, sustainable future and particularly better Ethiopia as well. Right. I may not go to the heart of the matter because we have presenters, distinguished presenters here, who are really very well versed in their areas. And these are Mr. Mark Gilks, consultant, European Institute of Peace, Dr. Tekali Negga, Balingerai, or the Neighbor Love Movement, and Ms. Kasai Damte, journalist for Asham TV. We have them there. And of course, you can see also the timing. We promised to start at 10 to 15 minutes, and we, I think, kept our promise. So now we are starting precisely as we promised. Not as written here, but as we orally promised, because in most African countries, oral tradition dominates written one. So if we trespass some of what has been written here, no, we are acting according to the context, for context is key for everything, not only in research. And then we will have tea at 10:15, supposedly about that. And questions and answer time will be after tea and coffee break. And finally, we will have closing remark from Colonel Sandy Ward, Senior Advisor, Ethiopia, European Institute of Peace. Right. And most important, of course, we will have a keynote speaker for the day from Ministry of Peace. By the way, I must recognize that there are distinguished guests in here from Prime Minister's Office, from Ministry of Peace, and from different NGOs and civil societies as well. So we thank you very much indeed once again for devoting your time to be together to discuss on this very burning issue. Right, so we have Mr. Tigafe Dabalke, Communication Advisor to the Minister from Ministry of Peace of Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. Can I invite His Excellency to come here with love and respect? Excellency.
Good morning. This morning I have the privilege of delivering a message from Her Excellency Mufariat Kamil, Minister of Peace of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. Invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me offer sincere regret and apologies for not joining you in person as you discuss and deliberate on one of the most important issues of our time. Let me also take this opportunity to thank the organizers of this gathering, Addis Ababa University, Peace and Security Studies, and the European Institute for Peace. The topic you chose for today's discussion and deliberation is hate speech and misinformation in Ethiopia. It's a well-timed topic which we have been wrestling for quite some time. While the topic is outlined in the context of our national challenge, the predicament is indeed global, and as such, it requires both national strategy and global coordination and collaboration. Tackling hate speech requires a multidimensional approach that encompasses legislative, educational, and technological methods and strategies. Designing a legal framework that holds those who spread hate speech accountable is an important legislative tool for law enforcement forces in confronting hate speech from legal perspective. Certainly, it will strengthen the capacity of law enforcement to monitor and identify the content and the message and those who spread it. Indeed, the legal framework is irreplaceable in protecting peace and security in our country. However, we should be further strengthened through education. While those who spread hate might have an agenda, we should not forget that there are innocent consumers of hate speech. Therefore, we must work with all stakeholders in providing sustained educational tools in identifying and challenging what is hate speech. The information overload of our time often does not give us time to read in depth, analyze, and distinguish contents. Hate speech and its implication on our reform agenda has been a major concern, and it is an issue we are committed to tackling. Over the last 3.5 years, our journey of democratization, economic justice, and social cohesion has faced some challenges. Among these, hate speech by those who are committed in derailing our progress towards positive change remains to be addressed. While the legal debate around the issue remains and is full of passion, the remedy must find the right balance between freedom of speech and expression on one hand and providing citizens with reliable security on the other hand. Striking the right balance in this regard is crucial. Our government strongly believes that our budding democracy will not be able to remain on the right course to deliver the desired result as demanded by Ethiopian people without the free press and freedom of expression. Without those, our democratic journey will be incomplete. In his recent speech regarding hate speech and the challenges that the world is facing today, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said the following: "Tackling hate speech is also crucial to deepen progress across the United Nations agenda by helping to prevent armed conflict, atrocities, crimes, terrorism, and violence against women and other serious violations of human rights, and promote peaceful, inclusive, and just societies. Today, I fear we have reached another acute moment in battling this demon." It is important to stress the fact that war, genocide, and ethnic cleansing do not start with weapons. Before the peace is shattered, before the smell of gunpowder infects the air, before mothers weep for their children, the premeditation begins with words. A carefully constructed narrative of dehumanizing the other already has been in the works. Our collective humanity compels us, when we hear the words of hate and dehumanization against any group, that we must speak up. We must raise our voices. We must not wait until the vile words of hate are directed at us or our group. As history teaches us, by the time the dehumanization gets to us, it might be too late. Let me leave you with the wise words of Nelson Mandela. No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin, or his background, or his religion. People must learn to hate. And if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for that extremely insightful and at the same time which resonates really naturally with peace philosophy, as well as, of course, with what's being faced globally today. Thank you indeed. I can't thank you enough for such an excellent and thought-provoking presentation. It's more than simply an opening or key remark. It goes well beyond that, to be honest. So thank you once again. Lovely. Right. So I'm sure you may remember currently what happened the day before yesterday and even today as well, something being circulated around. Allegedly, leaked information from the Prosperity Party, just cutting from here and then pasting here, cutting, but then the idea here, the aim is to disseminate hate speech, misinformation, instigate instability, and make people fight with each other rather than come together, as precisely His Excellency rightly pointed out here. Love comes naturally. Hatred, you have to be trained to hate someone. You must really spend a lot of energy and muscle so as to hate. But love comes normally. So that hate is being disseminated, and that's where this is out here. I'm sure you might have also seen another very bad fake news or misinformation posted by some people who really like to propagate hate mongering, if you like. That Ethiopians were burning the United States American flag, which is 2019 in Haiti. It was flag when we checked with a reality check. It's available in the Google. You can see how hatred is being disseminated, to be honest. That's why that really makes this one timely. And more than that, we have tangible, evidence-based, information-based, at the same time, concretely down-to-earth presentations are to be made by our colleague and brother, Mike Gilks. Just come here, please. And, of course, Dr. Takali Nega, please come to the high table. And Ms. Kasai Damte, please do come here. Right, they will, each of them, present for about 15 minutes. And after nearly 45 minutes presentation, we will have tea break. So I will just time and again come and remind them at the same time. I will not give them any red card, but I'll just, when it is about 10 minutes, I'll show them some sign to wind up, and then they would wind it up. And finally, we'll have tea, coffee, then coming back energized, then generate more questions, answers, and comments, and engage in this very topical topic. Thank you very much indeed. Now, can I call upon, if you want, you can be presenting from there, or if you want, you can come here to the podium. It's your choice, as you like. Excellent. Go ahead, please. Sure. Thank you very much again.
Thank you. Hello, yes, so my name is Mark Gilks, and I've been working as a consultant for EIP, undertaking some work on fake news, misinformation and hate speech in Ethiopia. I should hasten to add that my background is in implementation as opposed to research. So you might find that for the more rigorous researchers, really what we've been looking to do in this exercise was to really undertake a kind of pilot of an approach. And really, our interest has been in the approach as opposed to the sort of the hard facts and figures that we're kind of reporting. So to start with, the challenge that we're looking at is, I mean, I think has already been mentioned by those that spoke before me, like Dr. Jonas. But I mean, fake news, misinformation, and hate speech have proliferated with the growth of the internet and grown exponentially. However, these are very broad terms, and they're not particularly helpful for a nuanced response or for a constructive discussion. So we think it's very important to break those down a bit and understand the nature of the different components. We've observed, and I think everyone would agree, that all three of those have gained significant traction in Ethiopia. If we want to do something about them, it makes sense to make sure we have a clear understanding. Again, yes, the other point I just want to make is that The research that we've undertaken is based on a relatively small sample, and I would advise against drawing specific conclusions based on any of the numbers that we'll be presenting. So for our first step was to sort of draw up some subcategories for what makes up fake news, misinformation, and hate speech. We both worked, looked at the Ethiopian context ourselves and looked at other categorizations that people are using in more developed fake news research. And for us, we decided that under fake news, we'd have the subcategories of satire, parody, fabrication, where something is completely made up, exaggeration, where so the effects of a particular incident is exaggerated, image manipulation, and finally a slightly broad category of incorrect information without an obvious agenda. I think looking back, the image manipulation was certainly too small a category, and that's something that should be broadened in any future work to include, really deep fakes as opposed to just images. In terms of misinformation, our categories were information that was used out of context, misbranded advertising and PR, propaganda and bias, genuine misreporting, and mistranslation. Under hate speech, we had 4 categories of incitement to genocide being the most extreme, and negative gossip being the least. But before we so our approach was to go through a large set of, relatively large set of tweets from a pre-existing data set belonging to the Ethio Fact Check Twitter account. We reviewed each of the tweets over a period between June and November of the last year, and categorized them according to those categories that we were discussing. But before we go into the results of that, we thought it'd be useful to discuss what's different about the Ethiopian media landscape, and potentially why is Ethiopia particularly vulnerable to fake news. I think as it's well established, there's a very recent history in Ethiopia of state dominance of the media. Broadly speaking, the government controls 1/3 of all broadcast media. As you can see on this table here in front of us, of 94 different broadcast media companies, the government counts for 36, and particularly when you look at radio, though, the government accounts for 27 of 61. And while, and something that's worth considering as well is, particularly in the Ethiopian context, there are also a number of companies where the government's a significant shareholder, or at least politically affiliated organizations are. And I think one good example of that is perhaps Fana Broadcasting, where a number of government-affiliated entities make up the shareholdings. So while we did see that there was a kind of a 50-50 balance almost between on radio stations in terms of their number between government and the private sector, once you look at the ownership of those stations, that proportion reduces to closer to 20%. And for commercial reasons, the vast majority of truly private radio stations are found around commercial centres, because, of course, that's where the population is densest, so it makes the most sense for advertisers, which normally fund that kind of broadcast. Now, looking at the Ethiopian social media, there's some really interesting developments. There's there are a lot of new online publications that have huge followings. Many of these have kind of sprung up organically, as you can see from the slide in front of us. For instance, Facebook pages such as Ethiopian DJ can boast over 2 million followers. Sorry, these numbers, just to be clear, have been rounded slightly. But Zehabesha has 1.5 million, DireTube 3 million, and when you compare that to the social media followings of some of the traditional press, for instance, Fortune or the Addis Reporter, Ethiopian Reporter, sorry, their followings are significantly smaller. These, and I think this is particularly of interest because often these new media organizations are based abroad, or at least their headquarters are often listed as abroad, very often Minnesota, or the US. They're often run, therefore, by diaspora. And they haven't necessarily got staff that have gone through the same media training, perhaps, or have the same editorial controls as you'd find in traditional media. And I think that's an important point to consider, particularly, for instance, I think Dr. Jonas just referred to the recent incident of a fake recording of or a sort of heavily edited recording of the Prime Minister speaking, which was put out and distributed by a social media page. In all likelihood, traditional media probably would have had more robust editorial controls in place to verify that information before distributing it. Now, moving on to look at some of our data. As I mentioned previously, it was based on data from the Ethio Fact Check Twitter account over a several-month period. After we used a tool called All My Tweets to download and save all of the tweets that were available, and then went through slowly to categorize each and every, and disregarding ones that we considered to be non-relevant. We then tabulated and coded the data according to the categorizations which we put together. As you'll see if you look at the table, we felt it was sensible for our understanding to allow things to be coded into multiple categories. So something could be both a piece of image manipulation and a fabrication. So that is why, if you were to total up all the numbers, it comes to a significantly higher number than 81. But yeah, our key findings really were that a lot of the fake news we were seeing was completely made up and utterly fabricated, and there was an increasing trend of image manipulation. In terms of misinformation, we found over that period of time there was quite a large amount of propaganda and bias, but this could also be to do with the period of time where that we were looking at. So, looking at the origins of the instances of fake news, misinformation, and hate speech, we noted that 60% of them originated on Facebook, and 15% originated on Twitter. When we coded the examples according to subject matter, one of our findings was that 36% of the samples we ended up categorizing as other, which probably says something about some of the assumptions we made while putting together our categories. But also that one of the really quite large sort of subcategories that we came across was the proliferation of fake accounts. I'm sure many of you will know that if you on Twitter, you're a very digitally savvy audience. A blue tick means that account has been verified by Twitter, and that's the official the official account. However, if you were to look up the Prime Minister on LinkedIn, Twitter, Telegram, or many others, you'll find an awful lot of other accounts. Some of those would be innocent and really just acting as a means to rebroadcast a message. However, they are certainly a channel for potential disinformation. Right. So, yeah, in terms of our kind of overall general observations, we found completely made up fabricated information was by far the most common category. We saw relatively few instances of misreporting by major news outlets. However, these did have the potential to be very high impact. So this is certainly something that should be of concern. As I said earlier, image and media manipulation, or deep fakes, accounted for about 25% of the fake news samples in our categories. These are likely to increase as they become increasingly easy to produce. In the samples we looked at, there was actually very little hate speech, but that is partly because we were taking our data from an account that was devoted to fake news, so there's certainly some bias there in our methodology. But what we did see was a lot of hate speech in the comments. We didn't find that there were major, or many, certainly not many major social media or old media organizations that were preaching hate speech, but certainly some of their articles were leapt on by highly polarized individuals. Now, in terms of what we think needs to happen, our conclusions were that, firstly, we probably need to move away from the term fake news, or at least if we use it, we need to be very nuanced about how we do so. We should make sure we understand the potential impact of a certain type of fake news and the likelihood of it gaining traction. On this basis, we can better understand the overall risk that it poses. And as you start to understand the risk, you can then start to allocate resources to dealing with that and to develop plans that are targeted. I think, certainly fake news in Ethiopia poses huge risks, but the methods we use to deal with it here, in recent history have been things like turning off the internet, which perhaps is, I'd argue, is a very heavy-handed approach. And if we make sure we have a more nuanced understanding of the different types of risks and issues, we can take a more nuanced and targeted approach, and maybe even preemptive one. So that's all from my side. I'll be handing back to Dr. Jonas.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you so much. I'm sure it makes a lot of sense, particularly when they concretized, defined what's meant by hate speech, for us to very clearly understand what's meant by misinformation. At the same time, that definitely helps us to concretize, plus be prepared for action as well. So that action starts with loving the neighborhood, for which Dr. Takalin, who should speak other than him, of course, has been preparing for this, and he's one of the founding directors of this foundation, this neighborhood, or Love Your Neighbor, Balinjere. Of course, I could have said more than that, because we are also co-supervising a student who is doing his PhD at the center of Oxford University, and he has this passion towards this hatred, but passion to love as well. So how to stop by loving, how to defeat darkness by light, and how to defeat hatred by love. I think he should speak more than that. Okay, right? So, Dr. Takalin, time is yours. You have it there. Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Good morning to you all, and for those who are attending outside this hall, whatsoever your time, good night, whatsoever it falls. All right, I am Takali Naga from the Never Love movement, and our identity is better expressed through our logo. Our logo, at the very center of it, it does have a diamond, which is a reminder that each and every person and face that we meet each day is quite precious as a diamond. And this diamond is also surrounded by a compass, which means that when we live by this understanding, then our life does have a better direction. That is what we mean. So the very question that we keep on asking ourselves and others is this question of how are we seeing the other? This question is so essential to us, basically because the way we see others determines the kind of relationship that we are going to forge with them. And that relationship, at the end of the day, is going to produce the kind of society that we are going to envision. So unless and otherwise we do change the way we are seeing the other, our relationship remain problematic as they are, and at the end of the day, then the society in which we are living in continues the way it is with its many of the problems. Now, when we pick up this very message as our core value, it is because we have seen both in Ethiopia and abroad that the relationship that we are having with one another could be characteristically said that it is full of othering. So what do we mean by othering? As you all know, we humans do have various kinds of identities. We could, for example, could pick identities based on the ethnicity to which we do belong. We also could pick identity based on religious line, based on our beliefs, or also the political parties and views to which we provide some sort of allegiance to. Now the question is, we believe what we believe, but the question is, how are we going to see the one who believes differently than us, or the one who belongs to a different category than ours? So othering comes in here when we divide our world into us versus them category. So in this regard, then, when we start to see other people as if they are unrelated to us or less than ourselves, then the idea of othering has emerged. So once we have forged this kind of mindset, then anything, any horrible thing could happen afterwards, because the other is not one of us to whom we need to deeply care. The other is rather a target, an enemy that we need to shoot at. So as you all know, our today's topic is basically related to misinformation and hate speech. Then I'm going to zoom into this. So I have provided here a very simplified version, simplistic in one way, because there are other factors also we need to provide, but it gives us the essence of what we are talking about. Here we have here a social media use. Nowadays we are starting to speak that social media has brought us so much ills, but that wasn't the case when it was introduced. There was a lot of excitement. The world is going to be a global democratic village due to social media, because each and everybody does have an instrument at hand which could be easily mobilized in order to disseminate one's own point of view. But increasingly, however, we are starting to have concerns. When we look at the Ethiopian example, for example, the internet penetration rate is only about 19%, and most widely used social media, which is a Facebook, which accounts only 6% of the total population. But we shouldn't downplay these numbers, however, because our oral culture, in a way, would help us to the online and the offline context to interact in a way that the kind of impact it would bring is quite high. So social media in itself is not something problematic. It could be used positively or it could be used quite negatively. Social media could have an impact on the kind of the quality of deliberative democracy that we have among ourselves based on this two factors. The first one is it is the kind of political polarization that we have among ourselves. So when we talk about political polarization, as you all know, we could be talking an elite level political polarizations, so the discourses among those who are leading the nation either by assuming certain kind of official position or by informal kind of influential aspects. Then here you could include the hate speech somehow there. So in polarizing context, then the other is a suspect. So whatever the other would say, you don't begin to take it seriously its truth value. Whatever the party to which you would belong would say, also would be counted as if it is true. Always true, even if that is not the case. So you have here the elite level polarization and a mass level polarizations. And as you could see also in social media, there is this issue which is related to the fake news. And a fake news is, in a way, it's a broader term which could encompass these three things: misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. And the difference between the three is not always quite easy to draw. But in case of misinformation, it is not intentional. Therefore, it is a partial presentation with certain kind of sincerity. In case of disinformation, however, it is intentional manipulation of the data that you have for the purpose of having certain nefarious end which would serve you. And the other one is which is called a malinformation, which is quite different from the first two one in terms of truth value, because it is true, but the purpose to which it has been brought is it is to hurt the other person in unrelated kind of context. So central to this tree, you find this idea of trying to hurt the other. As you could see that the arrow between the political polarization and the fake news is a two-way. So within a context of polarization, then that feeds up for the production of this, and the production of this also in itself is going to bring political polarization. So at the end of the day, what is going to be hurted at most is the kind of the quality of democracy that we all are envisioning, which is a kind of an inclusive one, and the rights of all are properly taken into on account. So this is the kind of relationship that I see between this. As you all know, since there are a lot of problems which have come in relationship with this social media use via the political polarization, as well as also the various kinds of fake news that we see every time, there has been two kinds of approach, generally speaking. The first one is the legal approach, which I'm not going to talk about it because I'm not an expert and I don't pretend to be so. But one thing that I could comment related to that is that much of the critique related to the legal approach is that could be an instrument which stifles also dissent when it comes to a developing democracies like ours. And beside that, within a context of a social media also, that kind of approach would bring the other difficulty that it could bring is that enforcing it is also quite difficult, and there is always this balance you need to maintain. You know, for sure, hate speech hurts, definitely, and there is also a second thing, but everything that hurts could not be prohibited, because critical voices also sometimes do hurt, but still they should be spoken. And also, there is a third element which would say that, you know, of things which would hurt, there is also a limit that must be made. Therefore, whenever you do the law, then there has to be, in a way, a balance between these three kinds of elements. But talking about a non-legal approach from the perspectives, where our movement usually falls under is you have four kinds of approach you would follow. The first one is called an alternative narrative. In alternative narratives, as you could know, central to a social media discourse is a narrative, an arrangement of stories in a way that it tells certain essence. So here, what you do is you present positive stories about freedom, democracy, acceptance, and civic virtues. And focus here is what we are than what we are not. This is where the Never Love movement basically falls under. And you could have also a counter narrative. Here, the goal is that is a sort of a deconstructive approach. So the first one, if it is a constructive, this one is a deconstructive approach. And the third one is media literacy. This also the Never Love movement usually does, because we do discussions about the risk of disinformation. For example, we had this kind of seminars in Jigjiga University, as well as also Gonda University, where over 500 students in each of the cases have been participating, where we taught to people what is the nature of disinformation and what are its characteristics and how could we combat it in each of the days. And where also we emphasize training the critical thinking. The other one, which is better done by the government, which is called a strategic communication, which means that the government could explain itself quite promptly in a preemptive matter, as well as also as a kind of response to whatsoever happens before the narrative takes the scene. So these are the four approaches that we have. So what the Never Love movement promotes is this 5 values. First of all, dignity, and the second one is dignity talks about the equality of all. We are equally respective of our differences, and we do matter. When we believe this, which means that we could sit around a table and talk about it. So dialogue, even if it is a long way compared to the other ways of settling our differences, it is by far better than the alternates, which are domination and violence. So we say no to violence and domination and promote this one. So when we dialogue, since our understanding is going to be enlarged, then trust is going to be developed. And when we have a trust, then we could cooperate. And that would give us to concentrate all abilities in innovation, and which eventually leads to the human flourishing. So dignity, by working on dignity, what we are doing is the dignity and uplifting the dignity and the words of each people which hate speech tries to deny. And by promoting also dialogue, what we are doing is we are giving voices for different kind of attitudes and perceptions which hate speech tries to silence through intimidation. Also, by promoting also trust, what we are contributing is to undermine the enemy image that the hate speech tries to build. Because if we fear others and their motives, what we are going to respond is with a defensive and uncooperative manner, and that is not helpful for the social cohesion. And the other one which follows is cooperation, which means when we trust and willing to rely on other peoples to achieve desires, objectives in a risky situations in a cooperative manner. And finally, this would lead us to creativity. So by way of summing up, what we do is we have this, what is called a covenant, where each of us do promise that we are going to treat our neighbor as ourselves. The way we define neighborhood is the way we see and treat others, not related to physical proximity or otherwise a kind of blood relationship that we are having with one another. So irrespective of our different identities, then we choose to see and treat our neighbors in a value, respect, and practical compassion, and this would make us a Never Love ambassador. So when this translated into a practice, then we translate it into our bodies. In other words, within a context of social media, then we promote this idea that the human behind the screen exists, and we need to resist this temptation to delimit an account to a profile, because there is a person which is going to hurt. And there is also this idea of ear, where we promote the idea of listening with patience before speaking, and resisting this tuning out of other voices. And we also promote this idea of speaking kindly to others and asking clarification whenever things are not clear to us, rather than ranting and gossiping as well as insulting others. And we also use the platforms to connect with another so that we could help one another. Thereby, we could resist building a account of anger and misinformation. And related to our hurt also, we developed this idea of softening our hurt to the full online community so that we could keep contacting our touch with their humanity. And we also promote the idea of following accounts that challenge us, not only those which serve as a kind of an echo chamber, which provides us the same kind of message that we are holding. So we promote the idea of resisting following those that only validate our opinions. And we promote also the idea of critical thinking represented by our brain, which means that researching for the truthfulness of all information before sharing. And we resist scapegoating for personal online life. This is what I have for today, and we could have discussions later. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. That's extraordinarily excellent indeed. Of course, we will have even more yet to come. Thank you, Dr. Takaling, for making it very clear, visible. I'm sure people will raise them in their comments and question time when we are done with the last presenter. The last presenter is Ms. Kasai, who's been working for Asham TV for some time. Of course, I happen to know her, not as maybe as a teacher or professor, but being tested by her, how much I know current affairs of Africa or Ethiopia as being interviewed. So it's now my turn to interview her, to ask her what she has got on misinformation, hate speech that we have here at hand. So, Kasai, over to you now.
Thank you, Doctor. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kasai Adamte. I'm a journalist. I work at a local television station called Asham TV. Today, I'm going to speak to you about hate speech and misinformation as a journalist, as a practitioner of the profession, which has been affected by this. So I will leave the definition and the meaning of hate speech and misinformation to the experts. On my end, I'll try to cover the trend, the impact, and the measurements taken by the government. So we all know Ethiopian media is still at infant stage, but it has been challenging for the past few years. So even though the media industry is a century old, the development has not been smooth as the rest of the world. One of the biggest challenges is government pressure. So throughout different administration in Ethiopia, the government has been under control by, the media has been under control by the government. If you are a private media, you are harassed by the government. But if you are a government media or a public media, you have to serve the party or the ruling the government. You know, you have to be a tool for public relations. So it has been challenging. So the private media survived here and there from time to time, but from financial constraint to the question of professionalism, the road has not been easy for media. On top of this, the rise of social media and ethnification media has put its mark on the media industry. So informations and hate speech has been disseminating, especially the past few years, and informations within fraction of second, without snipping our fingers, are there to everyone, to the masses. So this has been challenging not only to the public, but also to the media. The increase of production, distribution, and consumption of digital content has spread misinformation and hate speech, especially on the various media, online media outlets. Since the mainstream media uses social media platforms as a news source, their side effect, their hate speech and misinformation has caught on. So, as I mentioned earlier, everyone who has an account and access to the internet has access to disseminate information without questioning the responsibility or without questioning the consequence. So everyone who uses the social media, whether it is Facebook, whether it is Twitter, whether it is Telegram, has disseminated or has been disseminating information without knowing it or unknowingly. So, however, the prominent peoples, activists, and government figures have leading the way. They use their influence and acceptance to disseminate information for their own agenda and propaganda. One sentence of information is good enough for damage. Let me mention an example. We all know Tigray crisis didn't happen out of the blue. It wasn't unexpected. We knew that both sides were exchanging hate speech using the mainstream media and social media. They were exchanging war of words. So we know this is the social media consequence. Now 90% of Tigray population needs humanitarian access. So this is how the damage. So who are the victims of hate speech and misinformation? We all are victims of hate speech and misinformation, me and you, because we all are consumers of information for our day-to-day life, In the past few years, misinformation have been the fuel to conflicts, fanning ethnic strife, causing destruction among variety of groups, culture, religion, ethnicity, identity, and eroding tolerance and coexistence among peoples and communities who have been living together for centuries, And most importantly, it has contributed to the instability and disorder of the nation. So let me speak a little bit about the impact on media. I put the impact of misinformation, hate speech on media as a headache because it takes a lot of resource and capacity for media to fact-check every information that has been disseminated on the social media. We all know that private media doesn't have the capacity to do so. The media, on the other hand, the media is also the victim of hate speech. Nowadays, everyone wants you to be as a media only on their side, to be one-sided. That's against the media's nature. And they will hold you accountable to any damage, and they will hold a campaign against journalists and media outlets, distributing your personal information, insulting you, damaging your reputation. So this is the other challenge, the other impact of social media and hate speech on media. So what has been the government's measure? Due to the out control of usage, the out control of social media usage, the Ethiopian government recently ratified a prevention of hate speech and misinformations, and the law holds accountable any social media users that has more than 5,000 followers. But it hasn't been, as far as I'm concerned, it hasn't been implemented as it should have been. As far as I know, only 2 people have been charged with this law. So my last thought is what should we do? Here are a few recommendations of mine. I think everyone should be accountable to everything they write, everything they post, everything they share. We all should bring our ideas peacefully to the table, not violently or not pointing fingers to one group or one ethnicity or one religion. Facebook has been trying to take actions also, restricting accounts, suspending users. It is a good move, but I think we should do better than this. For misinformation, there should be access to information. The government officials are not willing to give information. I don't know their reason, but they should give information to tackle or to fight misinformation in our community. The other thing is media outlets should also establish their own fact-check desk. I know that their capacity may not allow them, but especially the government medias that have the capacities to do so should establish their own fact-checking desk to fight misinformation. There are only two institutions in Ethiopia, Ethiopian Check and Haq Check, who are trying to fight misinformation in Ethiopia. I think they are doing a great job, but we need to do more, because we all have seen what hate speech and misinformation is doing to our country. So we all should come together and do better, especially close to media people and government officials should do more. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Kathay. Thank you very much indeed for your angling of the presentation from the media aspect, as yourself, of course, a journalist, and how much we all have become victims of the hate speech and misinformation, as well as, of course, fake news. Thank you so much indeed. Brilliant. Distinguished audience, could you just face your neighbors there? If you so far haven't said good morning to each other, say hi to each other, so as to start creating this neighborhood already. Excellent. Just all of you there, wherever far wide. That's how we can start taking action. Brilliant. I can see networking is started already. Fighting hate speech as well. So far I can see love transmission going on live. Excellent. Now, also online people, please hi, say just to each other if you can see them. Now, I'm sure maybe God willing, inshallah, over 10 to 15 years, technology could allow us to drink coffee together wherever you are at once. But now, still we are limited, constrained by that. So those who are here on site will have 15 minutes coffee break. And as we come back, we will have discussions, engagement. Most, of course, important point comes out when we deal with the subject matter ourselves. So please, all of you, give them 3 times the clap for wonderful presentations, and then we'll go out and have coffee. 1, 2, 3, please. And one more. And one more. For yourselves. Right. So let's go for coffee break. Thank you so very much indeed. Very well done. Let's go for coffee. Let's go for coffee. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, can we just possibly come back and take our seats? Thank you. Please, yeah. Cheers. Excellent. We're walking the talk, to be honest. No excuses. Hello, Camille, can you hear me? Are you there? Hi, Camille.
Yes, yes, I'm here, Dr. Jonas.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Excellent, Camille. So, as we agreed, we will have 3 questions and comments from the floor here, from on-site. That will be addressed by the presenters. And then we will have 3 from your side. You will either read loudly, or we may allow those people who like to talk online, we can make them talk. And then 3 of them can be also presented to our presenters, and then we can discuss. That's how we have arranged. Over to you. Camille, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Shall we take first the questions from the floor?
From the floor here, who are already here. And then we will give you a chance to present the 3 questions or comments made online.
This sounds great.
Excellent. Right. Thank you very much indeed for being prompt on the use of time, because according to Ian Morris of University of Cambridge, time use, time management is an indication of the peak of civilization, to be honest. So in his Measure of Civilizational book, that's quite interesting one. Thank you so much for that. So now is your time to raise questions, comments. We'll give 3 people a chance to take part and to make presentations or questions to make. And let me just give you some warning also again. If you are making a question, please put the question mark at the end. It should look like a question. It should not be confusing. And if it is a remark or comment, it should not exceed 1 minute, because we are thinking of our neighbors, Balingerai. So we are thinking of our neighbors same time. There are others who should be speaking. And now, can I just see people who are going to, yes, excellent, Surafel. So who wants to go first? I can see His Excellency, okay, at the back. 1, yes, and 2, I was to make you, actually, so shall I reverse by permission? I saw 1, 2, and the third one? 1, 2, 3, excellent.
I don't think that is fair. I was second anyway. I apologize.
Promoted immediately because of the
It's all
high
right.
table here.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to say thank you for a very excellent and eloquent presentation of all the 3 presenters today, of all the elements or related with fake news and misinformation, hate speech. And the other fourth one for me, disinformation, which Dr. Takaling presented, which I'm very much interested. I feel that naturally fake news, misinformation, hate speech do exist. It could be without or with agenda, in most cases without an agenda, or it could be also a lubricant in a social life that fake news can make. However, I see the degree of each of the elements have different weight, though very difficult to put a rating on between a free speech and freedom to express that can exist in all information. However, disinformation looks for me very much organized and designed and has an objective to achieve, whether it is overt or covert. So in checking the reality, what would affect most is disinformation than any of the other. For me, fake news, it always matters with a game that may test the consciousness of the public in general, which may not really affect that much. But disinformation for me is different from others. So, for example, the first presenter didn't mention, disinformation as hate speech. Dr. Takaling does, and my sister, she didn't. So, can we really see disinformation completely different from others and more impactful, organized, synchronized, and has an objective to achieve in an evil way and in an organized matter. So it's good, to rate them differently than having the natural elements that in information dissemination do behave. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Surafil, please. Number 2, at the back, very back, far back.
Thank you. My name is Elias Mesaret. I'm a journalist. I'm a fact checker at Ethiopia Check, fact-checking desk, arguably the biggest fact-checking desk in Ethiopia, and also I'm the president of the Ethiopian Mass Media Professionals Association. Actually, I don't have a question, but I want to add some comments on some of the issues raised so far. At Ethiopia Check, we have an Amharic, and recently we will launch Afan Oromo in Tigrinya language. We are conducting training journalists. From what I observed so far by engaging in fact-checking myself individually, and after that by launching Ethiopia Check, is that the problem of misinformation and disinformation is so huge, but at the same time, yes, we have trainings and some conferences, meetings like this, but when it comes to the ground, there are no the reality is that many initiatives are not there conducting fact-checking. As Kasai earlier mentioned, Ethiopia Check and Hack Check are the only organizations that I know so far are engaged in fact-checking. At Ethiopia Check, we have 6 people. At Hack Check, I'm not sure how much they have, but they also have limited resources, I guess. Comparing with the problem that we are having here in Ethiopia, the things, fact-checking initiatives that are on the ground are not that much. If you take into account some media outlets, the biggest media outlets like the state media outlets, FANA, EBC, Walta, who have hundreds of reporters, you don't see them engaged in fact-checking. When you see experiences from neighboring countries like Kenya, most of the media outlets have fact-checking desks that they have established to tackle misinformation and disinformation. So the problem is exacerbated with the fact that there is a lack of information that journalists and fact-checkers can access. I think Kasai also mentioned that one. As you may recall, previously there used to be a government communication office. Now there is none. I know there is government, the press secretariat within the Prime Minister office, but they have a limited scope. So whenever a lot of things happen in the country, as you know, the country is going through a lot of changes, a lot of things are happening, but there are no government entities, whether it be ministries or the private sector, who are willing and are ready to provide information. So this is by itself fueling the spread of misinformation. A lot of attention is not given to fake accounts as well. Just this morning, through Ethiopia Check, I have a contact with Facebook. So earlier this morning, I got a call from one female journalist, a very well-known journalist. So she was telling me about some 6 fake accounts that are created in her name and are spreading various various items that have political content. And she was fearing for her life. But the media literacy in Ethiopia is so low that a lot of people tend to believe whatever is written on social media, especially on Facebook, is true. So I think the role of the media to engage itself in fact-checking is paramount of importance, but unfortunately that's not what we are seeing in the country. The media literacy is around 18%. The internet penetration is low, but still more and more people are getting their information online. So this must be, I think, addressed. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Elias, indeed. Thank you. Thank you so much indeed. That's also another input for people to think about fact-checking particularly, which is part of capacity building as well. Brilliant. Thank you. Number 3, please. It's that table, yeah.
Thank you. My name is Bafkadu. I came from an organization known as CARD. I have one question and another comment. The question is for the first presenter, Mr. Mark Gilks. You have been mentioning the follower base of some news junk sources online, like Ethiopian DJ, which has about 2 million followers. But you have compared it with independent media outlet Facebook pages, like Fortune and Reporter. But if you have checked the Ethiopian Broadcast Corporation and FANA, both state and state affiliate media, their follower base is pretty bigger than the aforementioned Facebook page. Why do you think is that these media outlets that have standard editorial policy failed to counter the hate speech and disinformation contents that are circulating online? Is it because they are not determined enough to counter disinformation and hate speech, or is it because of their own partisanship that they are not able to counter those news junk sources? The other thing I want to raise to all of your attention is the issue of conflict sensitivity. As we know, hate speech and disinformation is not acceptable for everyone. People might deny that this is not hate speech or that is not disinformation and so on. But if there is a clear evidence that the content is either hate speech or disinformation, everybody condemns it. But people usually make conflict insensitive assertions in mainstream media. Even officials often use terms that might lead to conflicts, or even narratives that might not understand the context on the ground. So the lack of conflict sensitivity is an issue that is not discussed and causing more inconvenience on the ground. So how do you see this issue? It is for all of you. It is also a comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. You said one question, one comment, but I think you had extra question as well. So you want to be punished, neither awarded as well. Right. I promise only 3 questions or comments, but maybe very quickly I'll give you 30 seconds using my veto power here. Yes. Surafel, sorry, Camille, just we'll have one more and then we'll close.
Thank you. I would like to get back to Dr. Takalin's idea of the issue of heart. You raised it briefly. My question to you is, if there's so much brain calculation in terms of identifying the other, we are detached from our hearts. And how do we really re-engage that part of our sense of who we are in terms of the heart? Is there any specific activities or anything we can do that our focus is not primarily in thinking through mental calculation, but the soft edges of our hearts? I would like you to comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. It is very precise. So now, you each of course have got about maximum 5 minutes to respond. So shall we start with Mark, the way you presented? Yes, in that order.
Hi. Yes, so firstly, actually, I just want to start by saying, Elias, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I mean, as you can see, it was a vital input for the work, for our work as well. And yeah, I think it's a fantastic resource for anyone who is following Ethiopian social media, frankly. So yeah, thank you very much for that. In terms of the kind of the questions that came my way, so for your first question, yes, I think one of the big problems we have is how we define some of the various terms that we're using. And actually, I think, for instance, we had slightly different definitions between, amongst us on this panel for, fake news, misinformation, disinformation. And I mean, and this really feeds into the part of the problem if we're talking about these issues. I mean, I think I would say in response to your question that the way I was using the term fake news was actually probably more in line with how you were using the term disinformation. So I think, yeah, I do apologize if that didn't come across clearly. Yeah, perhaps in the full report we break down some of our definitions a little bit more. So perhaps that will be useful as a reference. In terms of the third question around why is it that some of the Facebook pages gain so much traction? I think in many ways it's to do with their communication skills, and what they're trying to put across. I mean, on social media, your goal is to generate likes, retweets, and interaction. So you phrase things in a slightly different way. The goal of the more mainstream media is to inform, or it should be. So, I mean, frankly, mainstream media is not as good at generating the same engagement as some of the upstart social media are. And I think this is for me, this is a common problem that you see, everywhere in the world. I mean, particularly there's a lot of coverage of this around the US elections, around how content that generates impassioned responses was seen as much more successful by in terms of levels of user engagement. And I think, well, that's the metric that people are using. People will continue to try and generate outrage and sort of spur that on. So I think...
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And Dr. Kalim, please. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the questions. Responding to the first question, which framed disinformation as more problematic than misinformation, basically because, for one thing, in terms of agenda, the one who does a disinformation has this nefarious agenda behind. And not only the agenda, but also it is structured very well, which comes naturally out of the intentionality that has been mentioned. Taking into account these two characteristics, which might make disinformation more problematic than misinformation, but there are also certain cautions that we need to take into account. The first thing is the difference between the two is that of motive. Who did it for what motive? So for discerning the motive is always difficult. So when it comes to responding, discerning the motive is the most difficult one. The second thing is whether you did it intentionally or unintentionally, the damage has been already done. So in terms of damage, the two do have also a similar kind of impact. I'm saying this because a person who is misinformed could vigorously could share the information as the one who does it with the intent of making a damage. So even if conceptually it is true that the disinformation seems to be more powerful, but in terms of practice, given the fact that discerning between the two is quite difficult, and also the damage that the two could cause, because the kind of vigorousness with which one could pursue could be equal, and sometimes even more in case of misinformation too. Therefore, let us not also underestimate it, still taking into account. Thank you very much for Elias's comment. We are really grateful for institutions of yours kind who does this fact-checking. It's not only that there are few institutions in Ethiopia who does this, but also the facts that has been checked has not been used much also. Therefore, the question is not only whether the mainline medias should add resources so that they could engage in it. There might be problems related to expertise, because fact-checking do require really expertise. And the other way by which you could check is by using machine language, that is by looking at the sentence structure and so forth. And I think we lack both the technology investment and also the willingness that we should emphasize. That is a point very well noted. And the other thing, what the third attendee have asked was, it was related to especially the speech of the public officials whenever they are using sensitive words. This is so true, and I think we need to give it quite a weight, because within this debate of, for example, legalizing the control of this hate speech or holding freedom of speech without limit, there is this category which is called a fearful speech. This fearful speech basically invokes the historical collective memory, which are quite troublesome for some. So everything comes in a context, and whosoever engaged in this kind of public conversation should have much of sensitivity, because a term that has been chosen could invoke quite a lot of memories related to it. And we see many faults in this regard, both from public officials and other commentaries that we have. So it is true that public speech do require really skill, and we need to hasten that. That is what we could say. The fourth question was specifically addressed to me, related to one of the 7 principles that we promote, which is symbolized by heart. And we emphasize that we need to soften our hearts to the other. You know, when you soften your hearts to the other, which means that you don't stay only at a content level also, you try to understand the emotional element which is involved within it. Which means that besides responding to the content, you would like to see the kind of pain that the person who is making that statement is passing through, and the kind of joy also on the other hand from which that person is speaking to. In this regard, then part of the practical way by which you could do this is, it is whenever you are communicating to the other, even when you feel you are hurt, it is to phrase it in terms of your feeling rather than a blame language, which we usually tend to follow. For example, if you are deeply hurt by a kind of a statement, rather than saying that you hurted me, which makes it quite personal and combative in terms of approach, if you would say that the statement that you have made me to feel this and that. So in that way, then we take into account our own context. The other thing that we need to take into account is that we people do have emotions which go up and down. That is who we are, because we are equally emotional beings. So if that is the truth, then recognition of this very fact would enlarge our hurt in a way that maybe that very person has spoken this not the best of that person's moment. Maybe it is in the moment of the weakness that very person have said it. I think it's, if I'm not wrong, it's George Bush who made a statement who said that, whenever we evaluate others in terms of their worst moments. But when we evaluate ourselves in the moments of our best moments. We need to stop doing that. So we need to take into account that our interactions do really create certain kind of pain, and that pain is not always intentionally done so, and there is this human fallibility and a specific context from which it would come. So if we keep on building that relationships, and if the person becomes more important than what has happened on us, then we would be having that forgiving heart in others. So that is a practical way by which I would suggest.
Thanks a lot, and thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Yes. Finally, okay.
Just to add one thing about government officials disseminating hate speech and misinformation. Like I mentioned earlier, that in social media, everyone has the access, the motive, and the means to disseminate information, whether knowingly or unknowingly. But the scope or the damage may differ from person to person. For government officials, the damage may be huge. Nowadays, our government officials, whom we trust with our country's interest, whom we trust with our money, they have been disseminating, especially hate speech. They use terms, slangs, that may offend some group or some culture or some identity. So I guess we all should be held accountable when it comes to hate speech and misinformation. We all are equal under the law. So I would suggest that the government officials should be held accountable, and they should be responsible to what they say, what they write, to whom they interact. So in the past few years, we have seen, we can name names, I think Elias and Bafakadu have been doing a great job about hate speech and misinformation. I know them well. So I suggest government officials who are disseminating hate speech and misinformation, who are using slang terms, and who are offending some groups, they should stop and do their job.
That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much indeed. Just as we discussed is hate speech, misinformation or disinformation or malinformation, 3 points should be taken into account, I would infer. The first one is political culture, the overall political culture of the nation or the state. And that is, do we really have this political tolerance in respecting divergent ideas? Has it been established across the nation? I think that's very important, to be honest. Most of the time we have a political culture called zero-sum game. If whatever I've put as an agenda is not performed, then I'll go with my gun to the jungle and then of course, topple you down, then I'll be the king or the queen or the majesty. That has not yet been definitely tackled. Political culture. Still zero-sum, not tolerating ambiguity. My way, superhighway, or else dumb, nothing else. So this is the only alternative. Such ways of sayings, look at that, immediately. How much it has been so categorized, to use George Lakoff's terminology. And so I think that is absolutely dangerous. We really must work on our political culture, on tolerance, on understanding whatever has been said. I think that is quite one important point for us to consider regarding our political culture. Tolerating ambiguity. Not my way. Also, it could be variation rather than exception. So this way or you are done, like 1984 George Orwell's, or maybe Solzhenitsyn's way of putting things for former Russian aspect. I think that is to be revisited in policy making area, in education center, in philosophical understanding as well. That's one. Secondly, context, which is very much related to the previous one. In schools, do we promote critical thinking? Whatever has been written down is taken to be for granted. So whatever we have read, whatever we have seen, we have not been encouraged to ask them, to question them. So we don't have this appreciative inquiry and engaging into the subject matter. This, starting from family up to state level, take what's been told to you. Finished. Churches or mosques, instructions are there. But where is promoting of diverse thinking, diverging as well, accommodating those differences as well? So the critical thinking definitely lacks. And thirdly, which is very much related to this, is technological level. People can manipulate with technology, and we are very much naive for that savvy understanding of technology. Seriously speaking, whenever we interpret, we should all the time, of course, be well aware of how technology can make some tricks as well. That's definitely disregarded. In his excellent philosophy of science book, Lewis Carroll makes speak an animal and a girl, Alice in Wonderland. And Cheshire Cat, they were speaking. Cheshire Cat was confused with Humpty Dumpty when he was reading. Alice, I can't understand what this word means. Why should you bother about what a word would mean? Use it and make it what you like to mean. Let me repeat. Use a word and then make it what you like it to mean. So it's quite interesting. Context dependency almost all the time there. And so this political culture, these context specifics, particularly the critical thinking aspect and technological level, most important, being aware of context, I think are extremely important when we are dealing with this very sensitive issue of hate speech. Sometimes also hate speech leading to hate crimes, to genocide, which we haven't touched upon. Maybe we may have another round of discussion some other time, not today here. Thank you very much indeed. Shall we just give them a warm clapping? 1, 2, 3 for these wonderful people here. Thank you indeed. Thank you very much. So now I just turn to Camille, who is online from Brussels. Yes, so Camille, it's now your turn to read questions or make people who really are hungry to pose their questions and comments. Off you go.
Dr. Jonas. We're getting some really interesting questions from the Zoom audience as well. And a lot of people are interested in questions around the responses, what can be done on this issue. So we have Terefe, who, for example, asks specifically to Ms. Kasai, what role is there for the traditional or the mainstream media when so much of the hate speech and disinformation is centered on social media? And then we have a question from Dr. Adiat Abiodun coming from Nigeria, which really shows that this is a problem that transcends borders. Inquiring how a government can combat hate speech and fake news without violating human rights, which I think is a very important question. And then there's one attendee, Neema, who I think I will ask to take the floor because she had a couple of questions to ask to all panelists. So let me... Neema, if you want to unmute yourself and then you can ask your questions.
Hello?
Go ahead, Neema.
Okay. Thank you for the chance. I am an attendee from Ethiopian University. I have 3 questions for all of the 3 presenters. First, I'd like to say it's a nice presentation. I appreciate it all. My first question goes to Dr. Takali Naga. My question to him is, how do you see the government's involvement, responsibility in measures taken to battle the problem of misinformation and malinformation in Ethiopia? Please, Doctor, I would like if you answer with a specific focus on malinformation. My second question is to Kasai Dambe. What do you say about the media's internal mechanism of holding accountable of their employee journalists for dissemination or malinformation? And how do you see how strong is it, the code of conduct of work ethics with media organizations? And what implications does it have to fight or restrict misinformation and malinformation? My third question is to the white person, sorry, I didn't catch his name. Please elaborate on the point that the state dominance of the existing media organizations in Ethiopia as a cause factor to misinformation or malinformation dissemination. I'm not sure if I got you right, the message here, or maybe I misunderstood you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Naima. And I think with that, we go back to you, Dr. Jonas, and to the panel.
Thank you very much, Camille. I'm sure my distinguished panelists have heard between the lines with some difficulties as well. So they have three questions from the same person, and she's so democratic, by equally distributing to all of us. So shall we start from the reverse order this time? Kasai, will you start first?
I think I will comment on two questions. The first one is about the mainstream media verifying disinformation. I think the media's job is to inform people to make a better decision, to be the fourth government, to set an agenda. But due to the rise of social media and other challenges, the media is not doing its job very well in our country. So it should not waste its limited resources on fact-checking, verifying everything that is disseminating on social media. But due to the rise of social media, we are forced to verify and fact-check that is everything on social media due to the survival of our country. But like I said earlier, especially private media doesn't have the capacity, the resources to do so. So one of my recommendations was especially public media and government media should establish their own fact-checking desk to fight misinformations. But for private media, that may not be possible, but I still recommend it, but it's not possible. They are not even getting by the day-to-day job because of limited resources and financial constraints. The other thing is about journalists act as activists and disseminating misinformations. In our country, the line between journalism and activism have been thin recently. So journalists use their social media accounts for their personal gain or for their agendas or for their some group or for their ethnicity or for their representation. So I think journalists should be accountable as well as activists and government figures in order to fight or tackle misinformation, hate speech. So if you are practicing journalism as a profession, you are not allowed to be one-sided. You are allowed to be, you are not even allowed to have a side. You take aside your religion, your culture, or your group, or your ethnicity. When you do your job, you are in the middle. You take both sides. But this may not be true in our country's media ecosystem. Due to the instability and the bad culture of politics, journalists are involved in disseminating hate speech against some group or culture or religion or ethnicity. I personally don't consider them as a journalist if they are doing this. But
Could you make it clear, shorter?
okay, I think I have made my comments.
Thank you very much, and thank you. I'll give you 1 minute each, please, because of time constraint. Yes, Dr. Takaling, please.
I'm not sure I do justice for this question if I would answer it within a minute, but I promise to do my best. The first question is, what could the mainstream media do? For one thing, the mainstream media should take the problem quite seriously. It's not enough to have one's own social media page. It seems to be that is a kind of responses that we have. And also, if you look at the comment sections of the mainstream medias who are in the social media, there is less interaction. So if they could make it quite interactive, because part of the attraction of a social media is you could voice your voice too. Therefore, they could participate there. And I think resource also should be invested, as Elias Mesaret has highlighted, which means that experts need to be employed for checking factors. Also, certain kind of softwares also need to be purchased, because it's one of really the greatest troubles that we have, which disturbs the news ecosystem altogether. And imagine if our decisions are based on misleading information, what kind of world that we are going to have. Therefore, I think a significant investment must be done. The second question was related to what could a government do without violating the human rights laws. I mean, the criteria are three, basically, as I've outlined earlier. There need to be a balance between three things. For one thing, it is to recognize that hate speech do hurt. They do, really. They bring harm both at individual and at societal level. Therefore, we cannot take them lightly. And the second one, we cannot prohibit everything that hurts, because there are things, even if they hurt, that should be spoken if society is supposed to move forward. Therefore, the definition shouldn't be that broad enough to curb different kind of voices to come out. And there is also a limit for our rights to speak. Therefore, working and navigating between these three things quite important. And what the government should be quite careful in this regard is not to stifle also dissents, which are quite critical to the government voices, because a government whom we always praise is not a government that we really seek. So there has to be that sense of openness also from a government side to hear other stories too. The other is a question that I have been specifically asked. How do you see our government's response in Ethiopia by a lady? I don't know if that really matters, but if I'm asked, I would speak. But that is my opinion, and I'm not sure that mine is better than yours. But with this remark, what I would do is that the government could do more than what it is doing one, especially in the areas of strategic communication. Because, a government could take part, especially in cooperation with medias in framing the issues and in showing what is really at stake related to the events around which rumors are going on, or in misinformation and malinformation as well as disinformation is going on. So I would suggest a preemptive strategy, rather than responding as in a reactive manner. For example, certain thing happens and then we respond, and which could have been, responded earlier if properly framed with news briefing and so on and so forth. And the other thing is that many people, for example, are quite suspicious of the new misinformation and the fake news laws that we have. And part of the reason comes from the fact that the way the definition has been given is so broad, which means that if it is broad, then there is a lot of room for quite a different kind of interpretation. And I think that might be part of the reason that so far only 2 cases has been brought to the case. I settle my case here.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Mark.
Oh, thank you. So my name's Mark Gilks, and Anglo-Ethiopian would be more accurate than white, but thank you. So starting with the first question, what role is there for the traditional media? From my point of view, my background is in management consulting, so I would say the traditional media should really focus on making sure that they've got the right work processes in place, so making sure that they've got the systems there to properly verify information, and I think that's and to make sure that their editorial controls are tight. I think that's a really good starting place, and that's where we need to build from. In terms of how governments can combat fake news without violating human rights, I think Kasai had an excellent point about this, and I think sunlight really is the best disinfectant, and we need to make more information available publicly, easier to access, and that will help journalists to verify or to disprove blatant falsehoods. I think a big problem we have in Ethiopia is that the access to information is incredibly difficult. Unless you know someone, you're not going to get information or data. And frankly, I think it's incredibly obvious really that disinformation thrives in a vacuum. In terms of what's the issue with having a very large proportion of the media being state-owned, from my point of view, it's firstly, the risk of bias. Secondly, the risk of perceived bias. Frankly, you may as well be biased if everyone believes you to be. You need to be able to, you need to be in a position where people don't doubt your motives all the time. And I think it's, across the world, it's very clear that the ownership of a newspaper or a publication does tend to affect the reporting. So if you have one owner of a very large proportion of the media, it's likely that their views will be given a preference. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm sure, Camille, you are following the responses given from these iconic presenters from the podium today. And this idea of government elites or political elites, or leaders or government, I think I'd like to take you for free to political philosophy class, taking Gramsci as a case here. He would say, you can say this leader is a fascist or Nazist or this and that, but where have they come from? How have they grown? How were they educated? Therefore, each and every state, be it, to use his words, be it organic or, according to, again, his usage, organic means engaging creatively and critically with the society, or traditional in his sense, simply reproducing like in a factory model. So he says, each and every society deserves its leaders. Each society deserves its leaders, whoever they are. So about accountability here, when we talk about holding them accountable for using instigating words which are not friendly to people, which are more to fragment rather than creating friendship. They are part of this hate speech. Then how was our system? How were our society? Shouldn't we focus on healing society, the system, the education, and the interaction, the conversation from the very beginning? Shouldn't we focus on our peace culture, our political culture, our educational system, rather than only looking at government? I am not speaking for government, but I'm just speaking that science, peace science, political science. So I think that is to be taken into account. Going back to our basics, either as media reporting or teachers educating, whenever we frame a problem, let's see the other side of it as well. Great. Camille, if you have any burning question, I'll give you one more time. And also I'll invite from the online here, I can see already 2-3 hands coming quickly. My goodness. So I'll come back to you, Camille. So I am almost surrounded by spears of hands. So they are all given only 30 seconds. They will respect that, I know. So number one, Letty, number 2, Dr. Mercy, number 3, my brother here, yes, Dr. Solomon, number 4. 30 seconds each.
Okay. Thank you very much. My question, I have one question, and that is considering the political culture that we came through, and considering the political dynamics that we are currently in, how do media practitioners understand and evaluate the government's attempt to guarantee the freedom of information and to expand access to information?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Number 2, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jonas, and congratulations to the 3 speakers. I just have 2 quick ones. My first one is the opposite of fake news and misinformation is factual news. So what is the role of the academic institutions, research institutions, think tanks in promoting factual information? My second one is Facebook has put out recently a number of new policies. Do we feel these are sufficient to counter dissemination of fake news and misinformation? Over
Great.
to you.
Thank you very much indeed. Number 3, please. Dr. Mercy at the back. Yes.
Thank you, everyone, for your presentations and for the meaningful work that you're doing. I mean, if it through research or actually practical interventions. So my comment, actually, it's a question, is I'm doing a research that links on online hate speech and offline violence, what happens on the ground. And what I'm learning is there is direct hate speech that dehumanizes, that threatens, that questions in-group loyalty, and so on. So that is direct hate speech. But I'm learning that this might not be what actually fuels violence on the ground. Instead, there is a tendency, on the, like online social media activities that focus on Ethiopia and also worldwide. There is this tendency to mobilize group by sorry, I don't know how to term it. So basically by claiming exclusion or by claiming that one is a victim of hate speech and a victim of hate. And that actually directly fits into what nationalism is, victimhood. That nationalism thrives not on hating the other, but by actually claiming hate, being hated and being excluded. So this is what I'm learning, that actually claiming of being a victim of hate speech is more provocative of offline violence than actually being, a hater. I will complete. So I will finish in a minute. So my question is, have you found something to this effect, something that might, help my research and also everyone else understand how this online discussion fits into nationalism and online, not just online violence, but also offline violence? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And finally, number 4, Dr. Solomon at the back. Yes, yeah, sure.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for the presentations. So, because you mentioned the education system, I would like to ask IPSS and our European partners if you are aware of, because as a long-term strategy, it is good to invest on education, and most particularly on moral education. So this year, the Ministry of Education is revising the curriculum, and interestingly, the reviewing consultant comes from Europe. So it's a good an opportune moment for you to contribute, for example, the values of independent investigation of truth, or the importance of having a kindly tongue in this curriculum. It's just happening this time. Are you aware of that, and are you doing something about it? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Okay, so I'll go back again to my distinguished presenters, eminent presenters here. Shall I start this time from Dr. Takali, from the center?
I'm not sure I have properly understood the first question related to the media and the culture of the government. Are you asking that is the culture of the political system ready to provide to the media to be what it is? If not, I just pass it since I didn't really understand. I would go to the second question. It's true, when we talk about information, there are 3 kind of people. The first ones are the misinformed ones, about whom we are discussing, and to base one's decision upon that is disastrous, because truth matters for organizing our lives and interactions. And the second ones are uninformed ones. I mean, these are not wrongly informed, but without information that they are making decisions. So their heuristic bias are in a way determining the kind of paths that they are undertaking, and those shortcuts are not always good and true. And the third ones are informed ones, those who know inaccurate information. And to this end, then producing factual information is quite essential. And the role of academic institutions, not only in producing it, but also in disseminating what they have produced, is quite crucial. And what we are missing here is the link. That is, a lot of researches are being done each and every day, but they remain at the shelves. Therefore, there has to be a two-way road that has to be taken. Certain kind of dissemination workshops, probably by each of the departments, must be made. That I would say, but due to time, I just pass this one. And what Dr. Mercy has asked is, what is quite problematic is people who claim that they themselves are victims of hate are really creating the problem itself. That is a kind of a sage mentality which is being created. And I believe that this comes from our political identity and a troubled collective memories that we have among ourselves. So here, sometimes perceptions are more important than facts. And I think that is what is exactly happening, and that sage mentality is creating a kind of reaction toward the other. I think we are running with time.
Thank you. On understanding and evaluating government's attempt to access of information, as far as my understanding is concerned, I don't think the current government of Ethiopia is doing a good job when it comes to access of information. That's my opinion. So, there was an organization called Ministry of Communication. It was relatively the go-to person when we needed information or when we needed to balance our stories. Nowadays, the access of information is very tight. I don't know what the reason is, but government officials are not that willing to give us information or to comment on our stories. You know, officials only want to give information when it serves them well or when they can control the narrative. So this is a huge problem now we are facing on Ethiopian media landscape. And it's also have its own role when it comes to misinformation, the dissemination of misinformations, because government officials are not willing to give information to the media. You know, so I evaluate the government's attempt to access of information now currently as, let me tell you something. When we do stories and we want to balance our stories from government officials, they are not even concerned about the issues we are trying to raise. If we say this organization refused to comment, they are not even concerned. They don't think it is a problem for them. The only thing they want is to control their own narrative, their own institution, their public image through the public media or through their social media accounts, not from the private media's perspective. So, that's what I thought about these questions.
Michael, have you got? Sure, go ahead. Oh, thank you.
So yeah, and just in response to the first question, considering Ethiopia's culture and history and whether or not we've made progress with access to information, well, I mean, I think you've spoken, very much to that point. And I think, what I would add is just, I mean, the more the better, really. I mean, access to information is crucial to, developing accountability as well. And I think it's something that will help solve a number of challenges that we have. So the sooner more and better information can be available to researchers and journalists, the better. So yeah, we should just keep, while we must appreciate the context, we should keep trying. I think that's very important. In terms of the role of academics in promoting fact, I think we need to be a little bit careful of the idea that often these are very complex and nuanced discussions with, an individual's viewpoint can really change change what you see as fact. And so I think for me the key isn't so much as having anyone to be a sort of arbiter of truth, but rather to make sure we're better at understanding what it is, the viewpoints of others. And I think on the question around violence on the ground, and I think your research is much more detailed than anything that I've done, so I think I'd have nothing to add at all on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Excellent questions, excellent comments. And IPSS was targeted by two people positively, very positively. Yes, we are aware that the Ministry of Education, based on public demand, are preparing sort of moral education to be integrated. And we were consulted 3 or 4 years ago to engage in peace education and moral education with University of Bradford, Civil Service University, ourselves, Madrasa University, IPSS, and from Faculty of Education. We got involved, and still UNESCO and the Ministry of Peace, Ministry of Education really are working on that, and there is preliminary talk we are very well aware of. What should be done by the institutions such as think tank or IPSS, Dr. or my colleague Letty raised? I think research, definitely education, educating, engaging as we are doing at IPSS, and at the same time creating sort of new culture, culture of tolerance, culture of also critical thinking, rather than immediately taking things at face value, but going beyond from what they see. There is more to it than catch the eye, as English saying goes. So I think that's extremely important to develop overall critical thinking. And there was a very interesting question came out from our guest of honor, Dr. Degafe earlier, His Excellency Degafe, that is brain outbalancing heart? As a result, are we becoming sort of consumers and sort of utilitarian at expense of the spiritual, the moral, the high ground aspect? Are we sacrificing our whole life for material benefit? Are we working on that? That's a very important question, which really needs to be ingredient in that moral education aspect, bringing the 3 H's together, heart, hand, and head together. So a holistic one becomes the answer as well. I think I should very quickly come to close, and then I must invite, I was to say His Excellency, of course, Colonel Sandy Ward, who has served a lot in Ethiopia as a military attaché in European Union, African Union, different places at different level, one of best friends of Ethiopia as well. So I'm sure, Colonel Sandy Wade, you are online here. So we are now inviting you to close this session. And at the same time, vote of thanks to EIP, IPSS, and Sheraton here, and of course all who have organized and who have devoted their time, energy, and of course economy as well. May I just hand over to you, Colonel Sandy Wade.
Hello, good morning. Thank you very much, Dr. Jonas. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clear and loud.
Excellent. Can you see me?
Yes, indeed, absolutely. Oh, sure, but not in a military fatigue anyway, but very civilian like myself.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, thank you very much. And speaking to you from Somerset in England, I would love to be with you in Ethiopia. COVID is in the way of that. So I am speaking to you virtually, but thank you, speaking for the virtual audience, the online audience, of which there are a large number of us. I'd like to say, first of all, thank you very much to the presenters who've given a sort of excellent cross-section of the issues around fake speech, fake news, misinformation, hate speech, etc. I think, just to make a sort of first general comment, it's always seemed to me that with Ethiopia, with its very highly developed oral tradition, this means that there's a very close relationship in Ethiopia between what is said online and what is said offline. And the figures that were given right at the beginning, I think by Tekelen, on access to the internet in Ethiopia are a little bit misleading when looked at from an international point of view, because a village with one smartphone has access to the internet, but it has unquestioning access to the internet because only one source to be able to go to. I think this is an issue for Ethiopia, and it ties into so many of the things that have been said by you all this morning. I'm going to talk about 2 specific aspects of what have been said. One is access to information, and the other is education. In the very first comments made by Atto Degafe from the Ministry of Peace, he talked about the education of innocent consumers. and the need for sustained educational tools. The fact of people being able to be taught to hate and to learn to love, using educational terms in those issues. Mark Gilks talked about identifying what's fabricated, and the need to educate people that fabricated information actually exists, and that not everything that's out there is real just because somebody put it on the internet. He also talked about the impact and likelihood equaling risk, and the need to tailor-make nuanced, targeted, preemptive responses to those identified risks. And it seems to me that education is the ultimate preemption when it comes to dealing with hate speech. Teklen talked about how we see others and how others are portrayed. And that leads to a key question of how to question what is portrayed to you, which again is an educational task, teaching people how to question. It's a fundamental part of all education, is to teach a young student to question what's around them and the messages that they're being given by adults largely. Dialogue allows questioning, but there's also an educational task in how to dialogue. What is dialogue? At what point does one allow somebody to have a different view, and for that different view to be not invalid because it's different, nor to invalidate your own view because it's different, but the right to hold different views. Again, a key educational task. Ms. Kasai talked about the mainstream media use of social media as a news source. And that leads to the question of how well are the mainstream media users of social media information able to judge what it is that they're reading and seeing, and to judge its truth. And at what point should they be saying that it's out there on the internet because it exists? And at what point is saying it's out there because it exists, saying it's also true, and therefore reinforcing misinformation? Again, an educational task. And she talked also about access to good information and fact checking. And both of those things, again, lead to education, that getting people to the point where everybody is their own fact checker and sees checking facts as a necessary part of what they're to do. So better information from those that hold it, and education, education, education. I think there is a need for a piece of research work to be done in the Ethiopian context to identify the educational tasks and to divide those tasks between those who are responsible for the responsible bodies. And I was very pleased to hear that the Ministry of Education is looking at revising that curriculum at the moment. And obviously there is a need for that piece of work by the Ministry of Education not to be done in isolation, but to fit into the broader need to work with other elements, for instance, the media, in better managing the issue of fake news. So this piece of research needs to be done, but it needs to be done in the context of Ethiopia and in the context of Ethiopia's oral tradition. I think also I saw a comment in the online comments about the need for short-term response because there's a very immediate problem. And there is an immediate problem, and there is a need for short-term fixes. But I think there is a need also to look at the longer term, the medium and longer term solutions, which come with long-term better education, really identifying how to improve people's consumption and questioning of information. I did a very quick online search while you were all speaking, and the first two things that came up on education and fake news from the Times Higher Education, fake news, the solution is education, not regulation, developing critical literacy skills. And from the New Statesman, why education is the only antidote to fake news, and quoting Finland, Sweden, and the Netherlands as leading leading leaders in that work of education against fake news. And I think it's important for those of you in Ethiopia who can easily see this as being an Ethiopian problem, to look at those three countries, Finland, Sweden, the Netherlands, sophisticated Western countries, also finding this very difficult. It's a very difficult issue to deal with for everybody. I think there is maybe a source out there for people to use, which is a non-contentious research source, to see how fake news is being countered, which is to look at how COVID fake news is being countered. There is an enormous amount of effort going on around the world to counter fake news around COVID vaccinations, around whether COVID is real or not. And much of that fake news has killed a very large number of people. So there's a very good model there to look at and to see where the good and the bad has taken place in the countering of fake news around COVID. Finally, I'd like to say thank you very much to the audience and to IPSS for enabling this event. Also to say, just to remind you, that there is a pledge against fake news. I'm going to read two small parts of it out. We recognize that fake news, misinformation, and hate speech are some of the major problems we face today, and their causes are complex, interrelated, and numerous. We therefore commit to work together to improve our collective understanding of the problem and to take proportionate, evidence-based collective action against fake news, misinformation, and hate speech. And that pledge will be available online and will be sent round as a link to all of those who are attending today and all of those who were invited, with the offer to sign that pledge and to think about what it means for future work, for instance, a piece of work on how to educate against fake news. So finally, thank you very much to all of you. I wish I was there with you in Addis Ababa, and I'm sure that moment will come again soon, just as soon as COVID allows. Thank you very much. Back to you, Dr. Jonas.
Thank you very much indeed, Colonel Sandy Ward, for that extremely informative, at the same time, I would say, project-oriented, proactive presentation, because it is action-oriented. We are asked to fill in those pledge papers which are being circulated here for us in the on-site, and also the emails have been sent to those who are online. I'm sure you will sign and show your commitment to walk the talk, and we trust you will do that. Right, and after having said that, we have to, both online and again on-site here, we have to have group picture, and those online, please show your faces, your most beautiful faces, as we know always. And so we are going to have a picture. All of us would come here near the podium, and then we will have a picture which, of course, ties us together in love, not in hate. The picture is true one. It's not fake picture, true one, to be honest. So we are going to make our speech work as we go out. After having had that group picture, yes, excellent indeed, then we will have lunch together. That is part of pledge again. We eat together, therefore we are going to work together so as to fight this hate speech, this misinformation or malinformation, whichever way you like to say it. And most important, promote love, peace, and of course, development in this hungry, at the same time, of course, peace-loving people and country. God bless you abundantly. So, task 1, filling in that the pledge paper. Number 2, task 2, coming all of us here to have group picture. Task 3, having lunch, because you have been working hard so far. Thank you so very much indeed. So shall we have a final clap? 1, 2, 3 for all of us. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So someone collects all the paper going around. Please do collect, and then let's come here together. Guests of honors, please come here at the center. Right. Yes. And online, please, can we see all of you using, yes, your video, please, if possible.